Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Reserved Investments, and thank you for joining me. Now, in today's video, we are going to be talking about the top 5 changes that have occurred in the antiques and collectibles trade over the past 5 years. Now, in order to do this video justice, we have to talk about the only constant in the entire antiques and collectibles trade, which is change. And if you don't know where that statement comes from, almost every video that I put out, I repeat that statement verbatim. I also mention it in the articles that I write for Antiques and Auction News. Now, if we get in my DeLorean time machine and we go back to the beginning of the year 2020, if you're wondering why I'm choosing the year 2020, it's because that's when this channel was in its infancy. This is also right before the pandemic. So in 2020, literally January of 2020, the two most popular markets in the antiques and collectibles trade were the market for graded vintage comic books and the market for graded factory sealed video games. WADA came out of the gate. Certain things happened behind the scenes that I'm not allowed to talk about. And all of a sudden, video games became a major collecting force in the overall antiques and collectibles trade back then. Now, when it comes to video games, most of us saw the writing on the wall. We knew pretty much that that market was one big speculative bubble that was going to eventually pop. When it came to comic books, I tried to talk sense into you guys back when this channel was first launched. A lot of you guys, though, kept telling me comic books are going to go higher and higher every single year herein. Comic books were supposedly the bona fide #1 pop culture collectible of all time, and there was no changing some of your minds on that matter. Well, flash forward to today, and for the record, I'm recording this video towards the end of December of 2025. And I'm here to tell you, I'm sorry to tell you this, in case you're not aware, both comic books and graded video games, they are not the strongest markets in the collectibles trade at present time. The 3 strongest markets in the overall antiques and collectibles trade at present time, heading into 2026 for a quick review, are #1, the market for collectible cardboard, especially if it can be graded. If you have PSA 10 Pokemon cards, sports cards, Magic the Gathering cards, One Piece cards, even vintage obscure Star Wars trading cards, Series 1 from 1977, and they're in PSA 10 condition, congratulations. You can get a record price for those items on the secondary market, in most cases, with very few exceptions right now, because that market is in the stratosphere. The second most popular market in the antiques and collectibles trade, as of the recording of this video, is the market for graded vintage toys and factory sealed playsets. Whether it's action figures, whether it's actually the playsets themselves. If they are factory sealed and high grade and can be graded and encapsulated by AFA, and if they're from any of the popular toy lines that were made prominent during the late 1970s and early 80s, let me quick review some of them with you. Vintage Kenner Star Wars, G.I. Joe, Transformers, Masters of the Universe, Thundercats, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Any of those toy lines are trending at all-time high prices right now. Again, to get top dollar, the items have to be factory sealed in near mint condition and preferably graded. But if you have those items and you're thinking of selling, right now may be a good time to sell those items into the hype and take the cash. Third and finally, the last market that is trending at all-time highs right now is the market for coins. And the reason why this probably surprises a lot of you, whenever we see an increased interest in silver and gold bullion, which is what we saw in the last year with prices trending towards all-time highs, that also creates interest in the rare coin marketplace. There is a direct correlation between investors of silver and gold bullion and also rare coin investors. Myself, I prefer to go after rare coins. If you guys recall, a couple of years back on this channel, I did do a video where I showed off part of my 6-figure rare coin collection. If you really want to learn about that market, go watch that video because I go into detail about how to navigate that market from the perspective of a financial investor. Now that I said all that, the reason why I'm showing you the differences between what was occurring in the trade back in 2020 and what's occurring in the trade right now is to prove that the only constant in these markets is change. So in this video, we are going to be talking about the top 5 changes that have occurred in the antiques and collectibles trade over the last few years. Now, as I go through this list, I want to warn you, some of these talking points are very controversial. Some of these talking points are really designed to make you think. If you're a collector, speculator, or investor operating in these markets, and it doesn't matter what market of the trade you're in, I assure you, one or a few of these talking points is going to affect you regardless. You're going to need to make some decisions as a result of these changes, because all of these changes are drastically affecting the market going forward. And since this is a collectible finance channel, we have to bring this all back in full circle so that you guys understand what perspective I'm coming from. Remember, I'm not somebody here that wants to hold your hand and walk down memory lane as you tell me the first time you discovered Star Wars, or the first time you discovered a Batman comic book, or the first time you discovered Pokemon or Nintendo. I don't care. This is a collectibles finance channel, and that's the perspective I'm coming at you from today. I want to make sure that you're aware of that. Now, without further ado, here's the list. Number 5 on this list is a little controversial. I'm sure most of my viewers are going to agree with me, though. Number 5 is the downturn in the market for baby boomer collectibles has intensified and will continue to do so. Now, what does this mean? Every time we talk about baby boomers, I get the question, Sean, what is a baby boomer? All is what a baby boomer is. For those unaware, it's a person that was born between the years of 1946 and 1964. So if you're like me, I was born in 1976. I am a Gen Xer. Gen Xers are defined as individuals who are born between 1965 and 1980. So there is set criteria that is available out there if you know how to do an internet search where you can see what member of the generation you are part of. It's very interesting how this all plays out, isn't it? Social sciences is part of the antiques and collectibles trade, believe it or not. Now, with that being said, when we talk about baby boom collectibles in particular, this is another nuanced talking point that a lot of people don't define. When I'm talking about baby boomer collectibles, I predominantly mean collectibles that do not have overall cross-generational appeal. Meaning when we look at coins, currency, when we look at golden age superhero and horror comic books, all those collecting categories that I just named, they're also collected by Gen Xers and millennials. So as a result, when I'm talking about baby boomer collectibles in particular, yes, it's true. Baby boomers also collect and covet coins, currency, and golden age superhero and horror comic books, but so do younger generations. So those markets really are not part of this list. When I mention baby boom collectibles, what I am really referring to is items like Lionel toy trains, stamps, 1950s tin toys, space robots, Western toy collectibles, Marx toy playsets, and Elvis Presley collectibles and memorabilia. Now, there still are some exceptions here. Obviously, if you're a deep-pocketed Elvis Presley lover and you own like a pair of sunglasses that we know, we have proof belong to him, or maybe he's in a photo wearing them on stage, obviously that's an item that is probably in the top 2% of that collecting category. So if you have something like that, an item like that is going to be cherished for many, many years. When I talk about Elvis Presley collectibles and memorabilia, I'm more or less referring to the mass-produced items, the vintage records that people are going after of his. Those items have less and less appeal with each passing year, simply because, and I hate to be morbid here, but every day, like 10,000 baby boomers end up passing on, unfortunately. So as a result, the market for their collectibles has been in a downward spiral for many years now, and that is going to continue. Again, I don't think that this is very controversial. Now, before we get to talking point number 4, I do have to add something here. If you're a reseller, if you're somebody who does like eBay thrifting, and you go to estate sales, you go to flea markets, you go to antique marts, maybe you stumble across a near mint collection of Lionel train sets, if you can buy that under market value and you can flip it onto the overall secondary market and make a profit, you continue to do you. What I'm putting this warning out about the downturn in the market for baby boomer collectibles, it's for people who are coming into the antiques and collectibles trade, and they may see opportunity here because these markets are dropping dramatically. Unfortunately, though, with a lot of these markets that baby boomers coveted, the ones that I just mentioned, there really is no opportunity for long-term growth in these markets, with few exceptions. So that's why I'm telling you that this is going to have a dramatic effect on the trade, because keep in mind, we talk about something known as the Great Wealth Transfer. This is where the baby boom generation is eventually going to pass on completely, and all of their wealth is going to trickle down to the other generations, whether it be Generation X like me or the millennial generation. Well, one of the things that we don't discuss enough is not all of baby boomers have their money in stocks, bonds, cash, mutual funds, and real estate. They're sitting on a lot of junk, a lot of household junk, and a lot of collectibles that are literally being devalued by the day just due to a lack of interest, just due to a lack of demand. So there are going to be a lot of people like myself, a lot of millennials out there that are going to inherit this stuff. And unfortunately, we're going to try flipping it on the secondary market, and there's not going to be as strong interest in acquiring those items as there once was. So that's why this is a very important cautionary tale. That's number 5. Now, number 4 on this list, this is something that I'm going to have to explain in detail. And this is something that's going to trigger a lot of the younger collectors and speculators out there. So I'm going to state what is on this list, then we're going to define it. We're going to walk through this together, okay? The decline of the mega collector, the rise of the super hoarder / speculator. Now, if you don't know what this means, you need to go watch American Pickers, because let me spoil this for you. There's an interesting dichotomy in the antiques and collectibles trade that a lot of people are not aware of. And up until this point, I never really explored it on this channel. I have referenced it in some of the articles that I write for Antiques and Auction News, but the reason why I really don't talk about this is because it's super controversial. Older collectors that make up the antiques and collectibles trade, I'm talking about, again, baby boomers in particular. Those type of collectors do not care about condition and value as much as younger collectors do. And this is something that is paramount, because what we're seeing is when it comes to condition, when it comes to value, that's all that matters among younger collectors. And what's very interesting is there's a even split between Gen Xers like myself. Like, I actually know some Gen Xers, they collect comic books, they collect even antiques, and in all honesty, they don't care about the value or the condition of the items that they're buying. They're just buying it because they love the item. Now, the other 50% of Gen Xers like myself, we're serious investors. We care about the value, we care about the condition of the item. As a matter of fact, the reason why this became very prominent in the 1980s, the first collecting category that could be third-party graded was coins. So if you grew up in the 80s, and you were involved in the antiques and collectibles trade, that's the first decade that you were really exposed to condition grading. And this is why a lot of baby boomers, some of them, not all, they really don't go after graded collectibles for the most part. I had mentors in the trade when third-party grading became a thing with coins. A lot of them would look at a coin and they would go, well, this is graded MS64. This one over here is graded MS65. I really can't see a difference. So why is this one selling for $1,000 and this one over here is selling for $2,500? A lot of them thought it was a scam. It was younger collectors that took a liking to third-party grading. And that's because it was propped up, which we're going to get to later on this list, by the grading companies themselves and the auction companies. Now, obviously, if you watch any of my videos, if you read any of the articles that I write for Antiques and Auction News, I am pro third-party grading. I think third-party grading is a necessary evil in the trade. It's just like the Fed. It has to exist because of where we are in the trade at present time, where so much money is flowing through these markets. There has to be a way to protect the average collector, the average investor. And third-party grading, when done right, it brings confidence into the market, and it does just that. Now, is it more of an art than that of a science? The answer is yes. But third-party grading, for the most part, is a necessary evil. Now, this is an interesting paradigm that's developing in the trade, because a lot of these collectibles that a lot of the younger generations are going to inherit when the baby boom generation passes on, a lot of them are not third-party graded. A lot of them really are not in excellent condition. If you watch an episode of American Pickers, this becomes paramount. It's usually an old guy who's in his 70s, possibly even his 80s, and he has a dilapidated building on his property. You walk into the building, and it's full of stuff that's pretty much rusting away. And Mike Wolf, the American Picker, he'll walk up to one of these items, and he'll go, "I'll give you $500 for that." And the guy, who's pretty much dirt poor, looks at Mike Wolf and says, "Wow, I really love that item, though. I don't want to part with it for just $500. It's amazing how older collectors view the antiques and collectibles trade. Now, if you're wondering why I labeled number 4 as the decline of the mega collector, rise of the super hoarder, another thing that older collectors have in common is that they typically went after only 1 or 2 collecting categories, and they dominated the category. If you watch American Pickers, this is evident with any of the guys that collect vintage advertising, vintage Harley-Davidson motorcycle parts, tools, classic cars. They wanted to own it all. They didn't care about condition and value for the most part. They just went to the swap meet and they kept buying, and hoarding. Now, younger generations, they've become more value conscious. They became more condition conscious as a result of the rise of third-party grading. So now, today, we have younger collectors. They don't understand how these markets work. They weren't like Gen Xers that were alive during the junk wax era of sports cards or the modern era collectible comic book boom that occurred with the rise of 1989 Tim Burton Batman movie that starred Jack Nicholson, Mike Keaton, and Kim Basinger that set off a massive speculative bubble in modern era comic books. A lot of younger collectors, unless they're part of the millennial generation, they didn't even see the Beanie Baby bubble like we did. So Gen Xers really had a firsthand view on how markets that become oversaturated when manufacturers overproduce their products, how these markets turn out, where younger generations did not. So this is having a tremendous effect on the trade, because what are younger generations tend to go after? They're going after factory sealed modern era video games. They're going after factory sealed Pokemon booster boxes. They're going after factory sealed Lego sets. And they're just putting this away in mint condition, in factory sealed condition, until one day the price goes up on the secondary market. This is creating a mass dichotomy in the trade, and it's going to be a problem the further we go out, because a lot of this stuff is sitting in near mint factory sealed condition, and it's being hoarded in mass. This is going to have problems in the years and decades to come. So this is why number 4 is the decline of the mega collector, the rise of the super hoarder / speculator. And again, there's going to be more videos coming where I talk about the primary differences between younger generations and older generations collect and value a lot of this stuff. So stay tuned. Number 3 on our list is the rise of investors and the billionaire class entering the market at the collector's expense. Now, interestingly enough, we're not even talking about, spoiler alert, that's coming soon, auction companies and grading companies here. I'm simply talking about the rise of investors and the billionaire class that is coming into these markets, creating havoc. Case in point, in 2025, Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful himself, spent over $13 million with a group of investors on a modern era sports card. This ignited mass interest in sports cards as the overall news media, including Fox Business, including CNBC, reported on this sale. Now, it's sales like this that brings more money into these markets. Unfortunately, what makes this dangerous, most of these starry-eyed speculators and wannabe investors that are following people like Kevin O'Leary, that are following other social media influencers into this market, they don't have their deep pockets. So this is creating the mirage that a lot of money is flowing through these markets when in all actuality, a lot of it is credit. A lot of people are investing in these markets with credit cards. They're going into debt. They're taking out bank loans. There's even individuals, and I definitely don't recommend this, that are taking home equity loans to invest in the antiques and collectibles at present time. Now, this is where we're at heading into the year 2026. A lot of these markets are very frothy and they're very dangerous as a result. You have to understand that when somebody like Kevin O'Leary gets a group of investors together and pays $13 million for a sports car, for somebody like him, this is pretty much peanuts. This is equivalent to somebody like you going to GameStop and spending maybe 50 or $100 on a video game. This is not, to him, life-changing money. And that's where I think a lot of speculators, a lot of starry-eyed investors that are coming into this market, I think that's where they lose perspective. You need to put these markets in perspective where if a billionaire is coming into the high art market and they're paying $100 million or more for a painting, I don't sit there and go, well, gee, maybe I should mortgage off and sell off everything I have and put my money in high-end paintings. It's not going to work for me because I don't have the capital that a billionaire has. And unfortunately, when the news media reports on stories like this, it brings in the wrong type of interest and money that starts flowing into the trade. And that's why I have this on the list. At some point, there's going to be a day of reckoning. At some point, those credit card bills are going to come due. At some point, the wife or significant other of that investor is going to find out that that person borrowed against their 401k to invest in sports cards or Pokemon cards or comic books or video games or whatever it is. There's going to be a day of reckoning. And if that happens across the board, if there's a downturn in this market and a lot of people are forced to now liquidate, what do you think is going to happen to this market going forward? It's going to affect it negatively. Now, number 2 on the list, I'm sure a lot of you are going to agree with me on this, the growing dominance of auction houses and grading companies. And you got to understand that before the rise of the internet, before even the rise of social media, the antiques and collectibles trade used to be a very fragmented market. I mean, I remember a time growing up where literally if you wanted to bid in an auction, you would have to either drive to the auction, you'd have to bid via mail or fax. There was no email bidding. There was no online bidding. Either you were there or you were square. And ironically, back then, there were only really a handful of auction houses that pretty much dominated the trade. I mean, some of them you know and love or hate. When we look at like Sotheby's, Christie's, even possibly to a lesser extent, Phillips and Bonhams. Interestingly enough, it was really the internet that pulled companies like Heritage, Morphy's Auctions, Hakes into the fold. And Hakes has been with us since 1965. So Hakes was with us even before the pre-internet era. So to a lesser extent was Heritage Auctions. But by and large, back then, the trade was very fragmented. Today, you literally have auction companies and grading companies controlling these markets with an iron fist. And again, if there's a downturn in some of these markets, that can end badly. Case in point, I don't know if you guys are aware of this. Golden Auctions used to be owned and controlled by Collectors Holdings, who owns PSA. So at one point, we even had a conglomerate that owned a grading company and an auction company at the same time. Now, in my opinion, that's a violation of ethics. The FTC should get involved in stuff like that. Now, obviously today, Golden Auctions is actually owned by eBay, believe it or not. They were spun off. But this is why I warn you guys, be very careful where you're getting your advice, where you're learning how to analyze these markets, because I really hate to say this, at the end of the day, the auction companies and grading companies, why I think that they are a vital part of the trade, they are also in this to make money. They are in this to create the illusion that these markets are well worth investing in, especially over the long term, that everybody is going after this stuff. So just know that if this trend continues, it is going to have massive ramifications on the trade going forward. If the FTC continues to ignore the growing dominance of third-party grading companies and auction companies controlling the trade with an iron fist, we are going to be in trouble years, if not decades out. It is only going to get worse. We're already seeing this with Collector Holdings, who owns PSA, now attempting to buy Beckett. That's all I'm going to say on that. Now, number one on this list is going to piss a lot of you off. I want to be very clear. Number one on this list is the dominance of social media influencers and YouTubers alike affecting the market for better or worse. Now, I got to be clear here. Obviously, I'm part of this problem as well. I don't excuse myself from this, even though I try not to be a social media influencer, even though, and I can tell you this now that we're 25 minutes into this video and no one's really watching, the reason why I sometimes delay content on this channel is to give the YouTube algorithm a rest so that my channel doesn't grow at a phenomenal rate. I'm going to be very honest with you guys because I really don't like the lifestyle of the average YouTuber or the average social media influencer, and I don't want to be associated with those groups on a regular basis. That's why I'm more happier like writing articles for Antiques and Auction News, doing private consulting, stuff like that. I don't really like being in the public eye. That said, however, I do understand that I am part of the problem when we talk about this. Now, for the most part, if you're somebody out there, you really love Pokemon, or maybe you love video games, or maybe you love rare coins, comic books, whatever it is, and you're putting out content, if you're doing so in a responsible manner, I have no problem with you. My problem is there are people that are putting out content that is pretty much either rage bait content or content that is designed to get attention simply because they're getting paid per click. And there's a lot of bad advice flowing through most modern era pop culture collecting markets, whether it's the market for Pokemon cards, whether it's the market for video games. I've even seen some very questionable content come out about investing in vintage comic books. So I'm just here to tell you, you have to take all this content, even mine, with a grain of salt. Now, since I run a collectible finance channel, and since also I'm vetted, because I do write for Antiques and Auction News, they're not just going to let everyone write articles for them. There is a degree of responsibility that I have where the information that I put out is more about how to stay grounded, how to stay safe if you're attempting to speculate or invest in these markets. Unfortunately, there are a lot of individuals out there that are all too happy to get on YouTube, build a following, and they really don't care what happens to that following. Meaning, as long as they continue to make money, as long as they continue to have a presence, they don't care if you guys put all your money into something stupid. I have more of a responsibility to warn you that these markets are not all rosy. The only constant in the antiques and collectibles trade, going back to the beginning of this video, is change. Now, interestingly enough, we now have a growing number of not only social media influencers and YouTubers, but we have people that are doing rip and ship videos. There's people even in the video game space that are doing rare gem videos where they're showing games that are very obscure, and then the market's going crazy for those games when the video goes live. I mean, there's all different ways to manipulate and even not intentionally manipulate markets in the overall trade with the rise of social media. So what I'm telling you is over the next 10 years or so, it's going to be very interesting to see the impact that this is going to have. I mean, if we get a Mandalorian time machine and we go back just like 12 years, really YouTube wasn't a dominant force back then. YouTube really caught on within the last 5 to 10 years where people started uploading content about Pokemon cards or investing in whatever. And as a result, we're now paying the price because we can see when we look at like the market for graded video games, that was a massive speculative bubble. It was really people on the internet, people on social media that really bought in and fed that bubble. Had that occurred back in the 1980s or the 1990s, if that was a thing, the damage would have been limited. And that's the point that I want to make. Just be very careful if you're operating in these markets. Just be careful who you listen to, guys. That's all I'm saying. I understand it's very easy to get emotionally attached to these items and want to invest in it and call yourself an investor. Just if it sounds too good to be true, or if people are just putting out shit like, hey, just fill your house with modern era Pokemon cards and products, it all goes up in value. There isn't a single booster box of Pokemon that hasn't beat the S&P 500. If it's all fluff like that and really no logic, you really should dismiss most of that advice. And I'm sorry to say this because I do have, acquaintances, even people that I would consider to be my friends in the Pokemon collecting space. And some of them do create content. And unfortunately, I don't agree with the majority of it. That's all that I'm saying. Just be careful. So I hope you got something out of this list. Again, I know it's controversial. Now that I've been speaking for 30 minutes, I'm curious to hear your comments in the comment section below. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. And if you are subscribed, I will see you in another upcoming video.